You're watching the Sunbeam Alpine channel on YouTube. This video was recorded at the Sunbeam Alpine Owners Club National 2024. It's of Glenn Brackenridge presenting on Alpines and competition. Now this is a subject Glenn knows all about because he races his own Harrington. Enjoy the video.
So my name's Glenn Brackenridge. I am a very old member of the club. I had many years out of the club and then came back in when I bought my Sunbeam Harrington a few years ago. And I like to have fun in the car, so I've done a little bit of motorsport. In truth, I am probably the worst Alpine competitor that has ever sat in a Sunbeam, so why should I be asked to make a presentation on motorsport? Because clearly there are some people like Chris Dracott and the likes who are far more experienced than I. And then I sort of worked it out that actually, because I'm an ordinary person, I'm only a semi-skilled mechanic and I'm a very poor racing driver, I'm probably typical of any of the membership. Now I can have a lot of fun, so I think the value of this is that I can explain to you how you can have a little bit of fun as well. When I was employed, my employers said to me, "Glenn, you're making lots of presentations to customers, but really you're not very good at it, so we're going to send you on a presentation skills course." And one of the things they did was they said, "You've got to have what's called an icebreaker, and that's catch people's attention." So this is my icebreaker. Let's have some volume, shall we? That's it, the icebreaker's over. So the other thing that we have to agree before we start is that there's a lot of frustration when you get involved in motorsport, and this presentation is labelled parental guidance because there may be a bit of blasphemy, and I do tend to use some odd words, and I try and avoid the really bad ones, but there are swear words that I'm afraid we're going to encounter, and one of those is bollocks. So not in the biological sense, but I hope you can forgive me for a little bit of that. So Alpines and competition. I've realised that not many of you want to thrash the bollocks off your nice lovely Alpines on a track. However, you may be interested to know that your cars have a good competition pedigree, and that you didn't buy a hairdresser's car, although apologies if we've got hairdressers here. That you might have an interest in setting the record straight with your critical mates who own MGs and TRs. This was the case in the 70s when I first got my Alpine. My MGB owning mate said, "What the hell did you want to get an Alpine for?" And you may also be interested to know, at the end of the day, what could you do with your car if the opportunity presented itself? So the following details are my perspective. There are examples of me in action. Then there's some examples of historical Sunbeam cars and their action. And because I'm not the world's greatest expert, there might be omissions and errors, in which case I apologise. Be quiet! Right. So, the first rule of bollocks is that things break under stress. You learn this pretty quickly, especially with 60-year-old cars. So 10 minutes at 6,000 RPM is about the same as 10 years of normal driving, and preparation is essential. and if you don't check something, it will break. When I first got my car, I took a mate to Castle Combe. We had a track day. We booked all day. We never got more than 3 laps between breakdowns, and so this was a car that had never been, well, hadn't been stressed, but we found out all the weak points as we commissioned the car. Then you also learn that even if you check something, it will still break. And my current pain, like last year it was fuel pumps, this year it's wheel nuts. I decided to swap my old rusty wheel nuts, that had been on the car for years, for some nice shiny chrome plated wheel nuts. Coincidentally, I've had a whole summer of grief because it seems that underneath the chrome was cheese, and this was me at Prescott, just driving down the road casually. Suddenly a wheel came off, and my wife went to pick up the wheel nuts down the road, and the thread had all gone. And I contacted the helpline. I got some interesting advice. Take a wheel nut off each of the other wheels and put it back on and get yourself running. I'd already thought of that. Unfortunately, when I took the wheel nuts, one off each of the other wheels, they were also on the point of stripping. So what I learned was that these new wheel nuts, they couldn't handle the torque that I was applying. Strip nuts, that was the first thing. Then the second bollock situation. After repairing my car and deciding that I needed new studs and new nuts, I swapped my race wheels to put on the new studs, new nuts, and having jacked the car up, it was wedged into my garage. I found that 3 of the wheels were nicely spinning fine. The other wheel on the back was wedged against the corner of the garage. In order for me to double check that it rotated well, I would have had to drop the car down, drive it out, move it in, jack it up, and you know, I was really tired, and I thought, don't worry, it's going to be the same as the driver's side wheel. Well, it wasn't. And what I learned is that burning rubber has a particular smell. Never assume anything. So this, by the time I'd got to this point, this is at Thruxton. By the time I'd got to this point, I'd done a lap and a half, and the inside of my car was smelling of burning rubber. So I was already slowing down, doing about 65, 70. That was the wheel bursting. So I managed to pull off, not too much damage, and I was sat there thinking, I've just wasted my £450 entry fee to this race. My day was looking really bad, but because it's in the middle of a qualifying session, I had to sit there waiting, and it occurred to me, in any race, 10% of the cars fail to finish for some mechanical problem. In the video I'm going to show you, watch for the wheel, and a reminder, at 6,000 RPM, things break. And if you lose a wheel completely, it normally means your day is over. Waste of entry fee. But on the other hand, if you can finish a race and get to the checkered flag, in my book, that means you finish higher than the people that failed to finish. So here I am, I'm sat at the side of the track waiting for the qualifying session to finish, in my misery. I don't think you're going to see it in this light, but I left my dash cam running, and as the cars were continuing, all of a sudden the marshals said, wait for it, track. So these problems, they don't just happen to me, they happen to everyone. And that poor guy, he definitely wasted his entry fee to that race. I was lucky. Alan Appleby was at the track, and he said, I saw a garage selling the tyres on the circuit, so I managed to get a tyre and get fixed. Anyway, another moment. So I told you I changed my studs, brand new studs. This was last weekend at Silverstone. I'm driving around, suddenly there's a bang from the front passenger side. I've lost a stud. And so I managed to pull over, get back into the pits, and I actually had one of the old studs in my toolbox. So I put the new stud in, and I thought, I'll be clever, I'll change the wheel front and back so that at least I've got a perfectly good wheel on the hub that's just had a problem. And I moved the other wheel to the back. What I didn't know is that these nuts are not very good, and although I managed to do 6 laps, well, I was doing okay. I was actually catching the guy ahead of me. I ran over the rumble strip. You know what that is? It's the sort of bricks at the side of the track, and I think that upset the delicate balance of my new wheel studs. So let's have a look at this. You'll actually see. So I get up to about 90 miles an hour here, and I got spooked by these cars coming through. That's Gareth Evans. He's on the rumble strip too. My car doesn't corner very well, and I drifted out and I hit that rumble strip as well. Thought nothing of it. Carried on. And you can just see, maybe in the darkness, I'm just catching up this guy ahead of me. He's in an MG or an AC, and then bang, suddenly the car, I've lost the rear wheel. So what happened there, I don't know if you can see this easily, but I've completely torn the rim there. Where the studs have seated, they've completely eaten into the metal. And I subsequently found, because I'd run these white wheels once before, that the new wheel nuts I'd got are only partially seating in the recess, so that this is fine for normal driving, but doing what I was doing, there's not enough strength in those, not enough seating pressure in those wheel nuts. And this was the wheel nut, the new wheel nut, that caused the problem. Not enough chamfer in it. This was a wheel nut that I'd given away, but I actually had one left over. This is one of the Chinese nuts that I don't believe is very strong, and these are just some spare ones that someone gave me to get me out of trouble. But that's the reason why my car isn't here today, because I haven't yet resolved the problem of all these wheel nuts. I've just bought a load of studs and wheel nuts, so that will be my next action. And then this is what I've called it, how to give a Harrington owner heart failure, because then I'm going, oh, as they decided to lift the car with hooks on the wheels and put a strap around my roll cage. At this point I was thinking, it never occurred to me that a roll cage should be strong enough to support the weight of the car, but indeed it did. I had visions of the roof being ripped off. But anyway, so that's good news in a way. The roll cage is extremely strong. However, there's another kind of bollocks, and that's the dog's bollocks, because it's not just pain and upset. You can, for me, this is how I get a lot of fun with my clothes on, I call it. So this was Silverstone again, and you'll see here that I have plenty of power in the car. What I don't have is the guts to go around corners. This is again at Silverstone in the pouring rain, and what I learned is that a modestly powered car like the Alpine actually does very well, because some of the other guys have got too much power to put down on the grid. So off we go. Just overtaken. Is that a Morgan? And that's the Morgan. So I've overtaken Jowett and Morgan off the grid. You can hardly see anything. So you do not drive as fast in the rain as you do in the wet, that's for sure. So you'd see more if it was darker here. So this is exciting. This gives you a real thrill. And we're just going to see an interesting point here. One of the faster cars, too much power, it spun. So you've got to be careful when you put the power down. And I managed to get that power down, pull away from the Morgan again. So that was a good day. And in fact, I got some good handicap points for that. I didn't come last either. And this is what happens in the dry. This is, if you race your car, you are part of a club with other interesting cars. This is Maserati. There's an S.A.O.C, another Alpine, Gareth Evans. That's a custom MG. There's custom TRs. There's a Ferrari engine car. You're in a fabulous sort of group of drivers. And again, I've got plenty of power. Start well. My problem is I don't go around corners, so let's stop this here. We're blessed with the discovery of quite a few surviving competition cars. To quickly go through them, you've got the Le Mans Index of Thermal Efficiency winner, 3000 RW. You've got 3001 RW, belongs to Tristan Bradfield. That was severely damaged and burnt, and he's managed to restore it over the years and bring it back. We've got XRW 302, which is owned by John Wilshire, and this was the car that won the 1964 Sports Car Championship, driven by Bernard Unit. There's the 1962 and 3 Alpines, 9201 RW and 03. They both survived. This is Stephen Gray and Justin Harrington. There's car 43, which is Steve Alcala's Sebring Alpine. I call it 4455. This is a Sebring Harrington. It's actually been rebodied, but I have a lot of sympathy with the guy who drove this. I'll explain in a minute. In America, there was some very popular race series where the Alpine did extremely well. I don't know why it had such a bad reputation in the UK. A couple of very noted cars. Not to forget that an Alpine won its class in the 1961 Monte Carlo Rally. A private entrant, because Sunbeam themselves didn't have any money to fund Alpines. And then recently, in the last 10 years, 2 Harringtons have been discovered that competed in the 1962 RAC Rally. So let's just take a look at them. 3000 RW is the Seacrest Green Harrington with the aerodynamic modifications headlights. This is now owned by a chap called Jack Auerbach in the USA. He's pictured here in his yellow suit. The guy in the red suit is called Steve Silverstone, and he has a whole room in his house dedicated to filing cabinets with the results of Sunbeams in historic racing. He is the absolute global authority on motorsport. Car 43, I believe this was rediscovered with Steve's help, and in fact he's also helped discover another of the Sebring cars, because after they finished their racing life, and they were usually sold off and used as ordinary cars, the competition cars all had aluminium panels, and this is how these cars have been discovered and recognised. And then when you delve back in, you find that, hey, this was one of the Sebring cars. So here is Joe Alcala with one of the original drivers, Joe Shepherd, and I believe you could buy this car if you wanted at the moment. Here are the two Harringtons. The story is that they're both very close together in VIN numbers, in build. They're probably built the same week at Harrington's. They both turned up independently for the RHC rally and realised, hey, maybe we should have a little team. So this car here is 2-egg, and this one is Mel 63, and unfortunately you can see it's had a major smash, and I don't think either of the cars finished the rally. I think 2-egg ran over a rock and split the sump. So, but it's nice to know that they've both been found. So 2-egg went off into Ireland for many years. No one knew it existed until it came out about 10 years ago at the NEC, and so we went and had a look at it. It's been very nicely restored, but there's lots of Harrington bits missing. So it's somewhat non-original, but it's still a very nice car, and you could have bought that 10 years ago for £26,000. Here's Mel 63, and this is at Goodwood, and yet again it's had another massive smack on the front. This car then also vanished for 40 years, and again about 10 years ago Jan Igbohm, who used to run the Harrington Registry, got contacted by this chap in Holland, I think, to say he was restoring this Harrington Alpine, and there's all sorts of fittings on it and bolt holes which suggested it had bonnet straps, extra fog lights and whatever. And after they looked at the chassis number, the VIN plate, they realised it was Mel 63, and this is what it looks like now, so it's been restored. Let's look at the Le Mans history. So in 1961, Sunbeam, the competition department, had a very limited budget to run cars. I think they prepared 3 cars but could only afford to run 2. One of them they gave to Harringtons through the friendship circle of Roots and Harringtons, who were interested in putting a fiberglass roof on, sort of aerodynamic shaped roof. So that's where the Harrington roof came from. And they also modified the headlights. That car did 261 laps in the 24 hours. It was rain affected, and not many people make a note of that. 16th place overall, and it won the index of thermal efficiency, which is a sort of miles per gallon per weight type measurement. And the drivers were Peter Harper and Peter Proctor, and unfortunately I believe Peter Proctor died yesterday. Do I have to say that? That's very unfortunate. The story goes that the Aston Martin crew, who were all very friendly with the Sunbeam guys, if they came across them in the race, they would jink in front and give them an extra 5-mile-an-hour tow down the straight, which may have helped. In 1962, they entered again with 3 cars, and these cars are 9201 RW, 02 and 03 RW. 9201 and 03 still survive. 02 has vanished, and the story goes it was stolen and it's gone off to France and it was stripped there. Interestingly, that car, number 32, finished in 15th, actually did better than the Harrington the year before, and it did 268 laps in a dry race. I doubt this photograph because I think Sunbeam changed registration numbers and car numbers quite liberally, so we can't actually guarantee the photo is of that car. The next year, Jack Brabham prepared the cars, and unfortunately they may have been overstressed because neither of them finished. But if we want a comparison with other makes, look at this. The 1963 much heralded MGB only completed 264 laps. So the Alpine in that era was no slouch, and it was not at any disadvantage to the opposition. What people also forget, or doesn't get, or we don't mention it in the Sunbeam world, is that 1961 was actually a big success for Triumph. Triumph made a big pitch for a team trophy. They had special engines, 3-car team, and all 3 cars finished ahead of Sunbeam, albeit with bigger engines, so they were in a different class. And Triumph, being more funded, they knew this was a big opportunity for them, so they took a film crew, and there is a video you can find on YouTube of the Triumph success, and you can see, maybe not that clearly, but Triumph and Sunbeam were in the pit next door to each other, and there is some cut and paste video of Sunbeam action, which I'm sure Roots bought off. They bought the off cuttings from Triumph and put their own video together. But in that you can see that that's 3001 RW, Tristan's car, and you can also see 3000 RW. And when I show the video, please watch the wiper blades, because you'll then understand how wet this race was. Poor conditions. And also there's other footage, one clip which I haven't put here, shows a driver having been thrown out of his car, lying on the side of the track, being tended to by medical people. That's how safe racing was in 1961.
But at the pits, business as usual. Team manager Norman Garrett and timekeeper Jackie Reese grimly watched the Hopkirk Alpine through its refueling stop. In fact, this car is unfortunately later to be disqualified under the rigid technical regulations. But in comes the other Alpine, driven by the rally partnership of Peter Harper, and instantly the drivers exchange limericks.
Watch the wipers.
Now, the first breath of air.
I can tell you saw that little clip of me at Silverstone in the rain. Visibility is horrid. So you imagine the guts these guys had to drive at that speed in the rain, and that makes that success even more beneficial. Strangely, the Alpine did better in competition in America. I think they had more money to promote the activity, and you've got a photograph here showing Jack Brabham and Sterling Moss. They won first prize, or first in class, at the 6-hour 1961 Riverside endurance race, The story goes that there was more than one car, there was more than one Alpine, and Stirling Moss was in one of them, and he thought the Alpine was a pretty car but too heavy, and he didn't enjoy his stint driving it, and he deliberately blew it up and pulled into the pits and said, "That's me done." But Jack Brabham, who was Formula One world champion at the time, and by far Stirling Moss's senior, said to him, "Oh no, you don't get away that easily. You'll be my number 2 driver, and don't bloody well blow this engine up." And the two of them went on and won that prize. And Jack Brabham had a soft spot for the Alpine, so he promoted it for routes. He also marketed tuning kits from his centre in near Kingston. Cheam, is it?
No, Worcester Park.
Worcester Park.
That's where his garage is.
Same thing, isn't it? Cheam, something. It's all in the ULEZ area, anyway.
No, not quite.
And a reminder, so in the 1961 race, the Riverside race, which probably took place in the summer, you had the Formula One World Championship Series going on, and Jack Brabham was probably world champion when he had that race. I'll have to check it up, but there's a distinct possibility. So when do you get Lewis Hamilton driving a Sunbeam Alpine or something nowadays? And the other story I like about Jack Brabham, and you can back me up maybe, is that in 1959, I think in one race, he actually got some of his points by pushing his car across the finish line to make sure he got his qualifying points for the World Championship. Other famous people drove Alpines as well, so here's a picture of Bruce McLaren in an Alpine. After those successes, the routes competition department thought, okay, now we'll support the American activity a bit more, and they sent 3 cars over that were used at Sebring in 1962 and 63. And as I said, Steve Silverstein has helped identify 2 of these cars due to their aluminium body panels. You also had another guy who I've got a lot of sympathy with. His name was, if I get it right, I've got it on the next slide, Filippo Theodoli, who was what you call a gentleman driver. And he had more money than sense, a bit like me, and bought a Harrington and decided to enter it into Sebring. And the special thing about this car is that he was friends with a guy called Luigi Cinetti, I think, who was the Ferrari concessionaire and managed the North American racing team for Ferrari. And he's talking to Filippo, saying, well, Filippo says, "Yeah, I've entered Sebring." And Luigi says to him, "Well, have you got a pit?" "No." He said, have you got crew?" "No." He said, "Oh, you better put your car in my pit then." And because of that, the Ferrari garage stuck a Ferrari badge, prancing horse, on the side of the car. So that is the story of the prancing horse. Sadly, it's not a clean story, because after the racing, it was sold off to the public. The chap called Bob Avery owned it for many years. He drove it till it literally fell to pieces. And then it vanished for 5 years. And at the end of the 1990s, it suddenly came back as this immaculate, in its Sebring livery. And it became apparent that he'd actually put the roof on another Series 2. That upset a lot of people, but it doesn't upset Goodwood. They're happy to have these entrants, so they'll give cars like this entrance into all the racing. It doesn't even upset the guy who bought it, and I understand the last sale price for this car was £175,000, and the guy's happy to have paid it, because he gets him invited into lots of races. There's some other famous people drove the Sunbeam very successfully. You may not be so familiar with Jerry Titus, but I bet you've heard of Ken Miles. And here the caption says is Ken Miles leading Jerry Titus, and they're in a 1-2 class win in that race. There's a couple of other Alpines that Steve Silverstein has managed to recover. One of them is there's a town called Vizala in California, and there's a Dodge garage, and the guys who worked in that garage decided to put out a racing Alpine. That's why it's called the Vizala Dodge Boys Alpine, and that was reasonably successful in the SCCA Championships. There's also another car called the Sports Car Forum, and Steve Silverstein has resurrected both these cars. The red one has been restored, but the white one is still absolutely as it was in the 60s. Let's come back to the UK. In 1964, you had Bernard Hinault, who I believe was driving for Alan Fraser at the time, won the 1964 Sports Car Championship. It wasn't such a big deal in those days, but he did beat cars like TVRs, MGBs, and if you've ever seen some of the YouTube footage of Bernard Hinault driving a Hillman Hunter, you realise what a great driver he was. And here's a picture. I think this one is Aintree, where he's launching off the grid, and we can see TVRs, MGs, Morgans. Here's another picture of XRW 302 at the TT Trophy at Goodwood. Not sure which year, maybe 62. But here's Milf 63 without damage. It could be this is the race that Milf 63 got damaged. Then more recently there's another car surfaced, and I'm calling this the Belgian Racer. It has got a long, I would say, contemporary, modern racing history in the States, and it's done all sorts of activity. Strangely enough, in the book of paperwork for my car, one of the oldest documents was this photocopy of what someone had done to a Harrington Le Mans. And I think Tony Barron looked at that and thought, I might do something similar to mine. That car, you could have bought that last year for £23,000. It seems cheap. The only problem is it's got the wrong VIN. So at some point in its history, we sort of pretty much know, as it transited from America through the UK and off to Belgium, it suddenly arrived as a different car. But the car itself is the Racer. Let's look at Monte Carlo. Of course, in 1961, Sunbeam couldn't afford to fund two sets of cars in the rally. They were already being successful with the Rapier, so they carried on funding that, and indeed the Rapiers came first and second in class. But what we can see is that a private entrant from Sweden came first in his class in an Alpine. So the Alpine, good rally car. If we look at modern rallying, probably the best name you may be familiar with is Richard Prosser, who for many years has done the Monte Carlo Challenge. Tony Barron in my car in the 90s several times, and then that was sold to Kenny McEwen and John Ingham, who did the Rally of the Tests. And we've also got our own Peter Klein, who won the Clubman Championship. I'm trying to look this up. I think it's about eight or 9 years ago. Interestingly, you'll see that the badges on the cars, one says the Winter Challenge and the other says the Monte Carlo Challenge. Round about the year 2000, whatever authority was running the races, whether Hero or whatever, were told that they no longer had the right to use the word Monte Carlo in the race. So that's when the name changed to the Winter Challenge, but it is the Monte Carlo Historic. You've got plenty of cars still active at the moment. Stephen Chapman racing his Harrington. There's a picture of Bryn Griffith's white Alpine. Gareth Evans has just put together a replica of the missing Sebring car, and he's you might have seen that in the video clip I showed you earlier. That's really running very nicely. Tristan Bradfield's Le Mans car. Stephen Gray and Justin Harrington have got the 62-63 Le Mans Alpines. I try to keep my car active, and there's a guy in Australia popped up who's racing Alpines. Where's your car?
It's owned by Tim Kemp. He does still campaign it,
Right.
but he's worked a lot out of the country these days, so the last 12 months or so he's not been able to do
So
very much.
it'd be nice to see that car come back.
Yeah, I think he's about buying it back, but I don't think we'll offer that.
So, what did the factory do to make the Alpines run specially? There's a very comprehensive book called the Special Tuning Handbook, which you can go through in detail. I thumbed through it the other day. I didn't actually see the flywheel section, so I've mentioned that separately. But lightening the flywheel will certainly help your acceleration. The factory cars, and we think there were 10 in the UK and 10 in America, or maybe 10 worldwide. Not many were aluminium panelled. All this guidance is really focused on the 1592 engine, but a lot of it translates to the 1725. In fact, what I would say is that there seems to be a current focus on, if I've got 1725, I want to go whole bay, which is fine, but in fact, and Chris will tell you, you can still build extremely powerful 1725 engine without having to do all the whole bay mods. And then it changed. So I put 1964 maybe is that it all changed. You had the entrance of cars like the Lotus Cortina, and with all deference to Alpines, there's no way that you're competitive. And in fact, with the introduction of Lotus Cortinas, Alfa Romeos and whatever, there's no nostalgia for last year's cars. So at that point, Sunbeam was yesterday's news. The 1725 engine wasn't ready. Sunbeam was struggling for money, and they put all their eggs into the Tiger, which was probably disappointing in terms of what results it gave. So what can you do with your car nowadays? Let's start with hill climbs. So a hill climb is something like, it's a short windy course, maybe about a mile long. You'll be the only car on the track at the time. You can go into a competitive series, or you can look out for charity events. All the hill climb circuits have charity days where you can go on and sort of pretend to be a racer for the day. They're normally quite fun. You can do sprints, so this would be something like Kerberer, where one car on the track at a time, or if you do a sprint on a large circuit, they may run you off in 20-second intervals, but the sprint is one lap and you don't have any contact with any of the other cars on the circuit. You can do rallies, and they come in two tiers. You can do a rally tour, which would be relaxed. You still have all your rally instructions to follow, but with no competition associated with it. Or you can do serious rallying, just like the HRCR Clubman's rallies. And there you will have, your instructions will be less clear, the navigator will have to be working extremely hard to track where you are on the route, and there are timing penalties both for being too fast and for being too slow. You can do what I like doing, which is historic circuit racing, and there are several different series you can enter, and they're in different levels of seriousness, if you like, and you may have to rigidly comply with the instructions in what's called the Blue Book in terms of your specification, or some series a bit more relaxed, but it's still a serious level of preparation on a car. You could do some track days, which is fun. You can teach yourself how to take corners properly. You might even be able to buy an hour's worth of tuition on the day from the circuit, and you can stress your car, because that's the only way you find out if it's good enough to survive a race. So what does a charity hill climb look like? I go to Prescott quite often, every year if I can. It's a sort of highlight start of my year, and it's like a private car exhibition. They only select interesting cars in the paddock. They all have to drive there and drive home, which is actually why I'm so bad at this, because I started fine and then I thought, hang on a minute, I've got to drive this car home. So you'll see it halfway through, all of a sudden I back off, because the Armco started looking really close, and just so you can work it out, between the hairpin, which is about halfway through, and the end of the circuit, I lost 10 seconds compared to other drivers. So let's just get a feel. So here we are. Come on. So I'm waiting for the track to clear. There's a green light there telling me when I can go. They don't start timing until you break the line, but in the charity days there's no competition. So. I'm already losing my nerve here, by the way. That is fun, and these places, they love to see Alpines, because they get 15 MGBs apply to join. So if you apply to enter with an Alpine, they'll pull your arm off to have something different. So the opportunities are there to have fun. Also, so Prescott, Cop Hill, Chelsea Walsh, these are all places you can look out for.
Can I ask a quick question
Yeah.
on that one? Do they give you practice?
No.
Just straight, okay.
Yeah, so that's another reason
You
why.
have to learn it. You have to do it year on year.
That's another reason why I probably didn't put my foot down
And
in the second
just
one.
one run.
2 runs, and then you can buy more at the end of the day if they've got time. You can buy more runs. let's look at the HRCR tours. So this is the casual rallying. You've got all your tulip diagrams. That's these diagrams. So you get an instruction of what you're going to do at every corner. In the casual rallies, you've got timings and distances and any extra interesting features like road signs or whatever. If you're doing a serious rally, you only get half of that if you're lucky. And so the navigator has his work cut out, working out how far we are from the next junction, whatever. So the casual tours, you'll get coffee breaks and a lunch break, and you get to chat to everyone, and it's nice and relaxed. No penalties. And there'll be a professional photographer taking photos. But if you want to do the serious rallying, you're going to have to get some serious equipment. So it's hard to see here, but you've got multiple triggers on this unit so that you can track your overall time, your time between junctions, your distance. And you need that because you could be driving a couple of 100 yards and get to a place where there's maybe 2 left turns within 30 yards. If you don't have the correct timing, how do you know you're taking the right left-hand turn? It's I find the rallying very stressful, and my wife does the driving. She got the easy job, trust me. Then you've got track days, and so this is a little video of the track day. Here we've got Simon Chapman receiving an award for clearly being the fastest Alpine on the day, although Steve Chapman. Did I say Simon? Sorry. And he's receiving his award from Grant Wilson, who is now the owner of Mike Broom's old hill climb car. So what does a track day look like? What does a Kerber track day look like? So this is one of my runs. I didn't do badly for a 1592 engine, did I? There's no other cars on the, no risk of collisions. You can drive as hard as you like or as easy. I lost it here because I didn't know where the turning was. So it sort of slowed down. I think Chris Draycott was 2 seconds quicker than me on this. And Stephen Chapman was 10 seconds quicker than both of us. But this is great fun, and it's not really that stressful on your cars either. So you just drive within your limits, drive there, drive home. What about the equipment in the car? So if you're doing historic motorsport, you're probably looking at twin Webers. In my mind, they're maligned. There's actually a lot of very good reference information, and you can get yourself very close to a good setup just simply by reading the manuals. I discovered quite some time after I'd sort of been using my car that I had 30mm chokes. Got the 40s. Indeed. But what this told me, if I follow my cubic centimetre per cylinder, if I want to run up to 6,000 RPM, I need bigger. And actually, that one change on my car was 4 seconds a lap different at Silverstone. There's a lot of good expertise in the club, some sitting here. You've also got Trevor Hibditch. If you're going to do historic racing, you're going to need other equipment like overalls, helmet, gloves, rollover cage. If you're going to do hill climbs, it's a lot more liberal attitude to the requirement, but you will also be competing with other more powerful cars because it's not separated out into age groups and capacities the same way. You'll need a race license, and we'll break this into two halves. There's one very easy part, which is the theory, and you already know this just from watching Formula One on the television. What's a blue flag? Get out of the way, you're being overtaken. Yellow. Slow down, someone's done something. Checkered flag, you've reached the end. Black flag, I've never had one of these, but if you're black flag, it means you've done something seriously wrong and your day is probably done because you have to go in to see the marshals. That's easy, doesn't take you long. But as I found out, I rocked up casually to the second part of my test, and this is the last bollocks of today, and I'm sitting in the car waiting at Brands Hatch, waiting to go out to be tested, and a 17-year-old girl got in the passenger seat. I say 17, maybe 18, but literally it was that young, and she said, "Good morning, Mr. Brackenridge, I'm your examiner. Off you go." And we did 3 laps, and she said, "I'm sorry you failed, because I took a different line on each lap." So she said that you're not consistent enough, and with people like you, you'll be overtaken all the time by faster cars. They've got to know where you're going to be. They can't have you in one place on one lap and another place on another. So you've got to go away and become more consistent, which is what I did. And so I can tell you, there's no room for pride or hubris. You've got to take it seriously, and then you can have some serious fun. And my current little joke is that just whenever you think you've got it cracked and you're in control, you're just one wheel nut away from looking like an idiot, which is what happened to me last weekend. So, my advice: get your satisfaction from preparing a reliable car, from finishing the events that you complete, measuring your own improvement lap by lap, race by race. Then you'll enjoy the camaraderie of the other competitors. And if you ever even think of a podium, that's a bonus. I haven't had that yet. So there's plenty of fun to be had from motorsport. So thank you. Any questions? Yes.
We do the light-hearted tulips in
Yes.
Spain a lot with 2 different clubs, and they're good fun organising them. We can do it on our ordinary insurance. At what point do you need specialist insurance? We need it for hill climb and things of that nature, charitable days. How does that work?
I can't give you the full answer, but the S.A.O.C. pays its registration to Motorsport UK, which effectively gives you third-party endorsement and cover. You will...
So is that like public liability?
Yeah. If you have an accident in a race, you're on your own. If you are in a competitive event on a public road, you've got to buy your own insurance.
So that's hill climb? If the
No,
hill climb is on a public
hill
road.
climb is not a public road normally, or it's closed to be.
Okay, so if it's closed,
If it's closed,
then you don't. So if you buy that as part of the organisers?
I don't know. I've never bought it because I've never done a competitive event on a public road. But the HRC, the Clubman's rallies, when they use public roads, and they also use closed forest sections, things like that. If you're on a public road, you've got to buy your insurance. That's for sure.
But that's if it's open.
If it's a competitive, but if it's a closed, then you can probably do it.
And could I ask one other question? Do you need crash helmet and things like that for those?
The series organisers will tell you when you have to have helmets. Yeah, sorry.
If you're with somebody like Haggerty and you just tell them that you're going to be on some form of regularity rally, then they'll either say you're covered or they'll just charge you a little bit to do that. You just need to let them know that you're doing it.
Yeah.
Buy an extension.
So my wife told me, don't try to be funny. Did I succeed? Right. No more questions? Thanks very much.